Tonight, Trump's McCain snubs as the nation mourns the loss of the Arizona senator. All eyes turn to Phoenix and then to the White House. That where questions remain. Why would the president treat the memory of a man so many Americans admired with such disrespect? And will our politics and our political conversations ever return to even some semblance of normalcy after the era of Trump? Then, New York's Democratic primaries for Attorney General and Governor, they shift into high gear. With critical debates coming, we will ask, what must each candidate do or not do to put themselves in position to win? Then, new sex abuse scandals for the Catholic Church as staggering new numbers of the abused and the abusers come out of Pennsylvania and D.C. New claims by a state attorney general and a former Vatican ambassador to the U.S. that not only did the Vatican know, so they allege did Pope Francis. We speak with the Rome bureau chief of the Washington Post coming up. Evening, everyone, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you for joining us this Tuesday night. Well, the flag above the White House, like most American flags, flying at half-staff today, one day after this White House's latest bizarre public relations snafu. President Trump's seeming inability to look past the political differences that he had with Senator McCain, who passed away this past Saturday, and to formally honor McCain after his passing. It is something that would seem to be a no-brainer politically, even if the president did not respect the late senator. Certainly millions of Americans and millions of veterans surely did. Finally, hours later, the president did what millions of Americans were hoping he would have done in the very first place. Late last night at the White House, President Trump broke his silence expressing appreciation for John McCain's service.
We very much appreciate everything that Senator McCain has done for our country.
For the president, it was a rare reversal. He had avoided any comment on McCain's legacy, but finally bowed to public pressure and issued a statement. Despite our differences on policy and politics, I respect Senator John McCain's service to our country. Earlier on Monday, John Carl from ABC News tried to get the president to say something, anything, about McCain and his legacy.
Mr. President, do you have any thoughts on John McCain? Do you have any thoughts at all about John McCain? Do you believe John McCain was a hero, sir?
Thank you.
Nothing at all about John McCain.
After McCain died, the president nixed the idea of putting out a statement honoring his legacy. The White House had lowered the flag to half-staff late Saturday, but raised it again just over 24 hours later.
It is such pettiness, and a reaction to a real American hero.
The American Legion and the VFW, both representing millions of American veterans, appealed directly to the president to once again lower the flags to half-staff. And amid building pressure, late yesterday, the president begrudgingly did just that. A McCain family spokesperson said Monday that the late senator would have wanted the focus to be on his final message to the country, a farewell letter written by the senator and read out loud by his friend and former campaign manager, Rick Davis.
We weaken our greatness when we confuse our patriotism with tribal rivalries. We weaken it when we hide behind walls rather than tear them down. Do not despair of our present difficulties. We believe always in the promise and greatness of America, because nothing is inevitable here.
You don't have to read between the lines where that was a shot. And I want to give you one more note on the backstory behind the president's decision to finally speak of the late Senator McCain. Now, according to multiple reports, that only happened after constant pressure and the insistence of his press secretary, Sarah Sanders, among others, who one official said was the driving force behind the president's 180, with some help from Chief of Staff John Kennedy. Meanwhile, the tributes to the late senator continue today from the floor of the chamber that he called home for many years. Among today's speakers, one of McCain's closest friends and the man most often seen by his side in the Senate and beyond, South Carolina Republican Lindsey Graham.
I remembered coming back and getting the nomination only to lose. I remember that night very well. He had wanted to be president. He was prepared to be president, but it was not his to have. And I remember above all else, the speech he gave that night. John taught us how to lose. I learned that failure and success are the different sides of the same coin. That John told me I have become better from my failures because it teaches us. And I've been tempted by my success. And without my failures, I would have never been successful. So to those who are striving as a young person, remember John McCain. He failed a lot, but he never quit. And the reason we're talking about him today, and the reason I'm crying, is because he was successful in spite of his failures. It is going to be a lonely journey for me for a while. I'm going to need your help. And the void to be filled by John's passing is more than I can do. Don't look to me to replace this man. Look to me to remember what he was all about and try to follow in his footsteps. If you want to help me, join the march. If you want to help the country, be more like John McCain.
I want to bring in our panel tonight, Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, Mike Morey, he's managing director at SKD Knickerbocker, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. Listen, somehow, some way, the story of McCain's passing has been eclipsed, but in some way magnified what he stood for by the inexplicable actions of the White House. There are more reports today that there is damage control going in because the president is livid at all the attention McCain is getting in the aftermath of his passing, with what will happen first in Arizona and then move to our nation's capital Friday and then Saturday. The idea, we joke in the green room as parents and stuff, if our children acted with a scintilla of the pettiness or contemptible neediness or whatever you want to say, we'd be mortified. But playing out in living color, Mike, it's unbelievable what's coming out of the White House. Lowering, I mean, you had to think to raise the flag from half-staff to bring it up. You had to consciously do that. You know, that wasn't an accident. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up.
Think about the images of the President of the United States sitting there while reporters were maybe 4 feet from his face saying, "Mr. President, do you have anything to say about the death of Senator McCain?" And he just stands there, grumpy, staring straight ahead, pretending as if, "I don't hear you, I don't hear you, I don't hear you." That is literally the behavior I would correct my 4-year-old for, put them in the room in a timeout for. I mean, look, the President of the United States, and unfortunately he has a lot of supporters, but the President of the United States acts like a spoiled little child. And even in a man's death, he can't find himself to at least summon up the maturity of an 11-year-old, perhaps. I'm not asking for an adult, but maybe an 11-year-old, and actually show some respect for a man who served his country. It's not like anyone asked the president to go out and give a speech about how great John McCain is, but a fairly formal practice of lowering the flag to respect this man's service, regardless of whether he agreed with his politics or not, and that he stood his ground, refused to do it, and it took the American Legion and the VFW to send a public letter to embarrass the President of the United States to do it. It's an abomination, and it should be embarrassing to every American.
And Andrew, I couldn't agree more, but this is going to get magnified. Wednesday, I mean, starting tomorrow, we're going to see in Arizona, and then they will move to Washington, both on Friday, where the Vice President, among others, will be making remarks, and then Saturday, where Presidents Obama and Bush will also be delivering the eulogy. And obviously, this was all consciously planned out by Senator McCain. Mm-hmm. And if anything, if he had the foresight to plan on how infantile and how the president would play into this, maybe I'm giving too much credit to anyone for doing that, but by God, if he wanted to amplify the difference for what he hoped the White House would stand for versus what this White House stands for, the president's playing right into it.
And the irony is that the president's silence was deafening, was deafening over the last couple of days. Whenever American expected him to say something and act presidential in a moment of consolation. Now, as we start with the funeral service in Phoenix tomorrow, it's going to be, will the president say anything? Will he be able to stay silent? I mean, if he keeps the behavior that he had the last couple of days that got him in so much trouble, it would actually help over the next couple of days. But does anybody really think he's not going to try to jump out in front of the...
last night, I will take even money with anybody. He won't play golf on Saturday.
He will
play
tweeting
golf, and he
in the
will
middle
use
of the
those
service.
pudgy digits, and he will be doing it again.
Yes. He'll be tweeting in the middle of the man's funeral service.
Because even in his death, he can't
be that dumb. I mean, I know we're talking about the president of the United States.
I'll bet you even money.
Okay, even money.
Right.
The reason why you hire people like Mike, as we all know, is he's the discipline. He's the person that even when you want to go tell a reporter what you really think about that reporter, Mike is the guy that stops you and says, think about this. If we do this, then this is the repercussion.
But Mike's firm also does crisis management. And I'm sorry, after the worst news cycle the president had at the end of last week, where two of his confidants flipped. I mean, the guys who have written the checks for the last 40 years and the fixer to make the problems go away are now cooperating with the feds. You could have taken a national passing, but you could have taken the high road and changed the subject.
Sure.
Somehow, some way, he managed to do this.
The level of, take away maturity for a second, the basic level of sophistication of this man as even a public figure. The fact is, that would be, smart, is that you have probably, arguably, the roughest week of your presidency. Two guilty pleas, one guilty conviction, one guilty plea. And then American icon dies. And you have an opportunity to do what Americans want of their president, be the father of the nation. Get out there, say something kind,
30
something
seconds.
unifying. And imagine, he's lowered the bar so much. Could you imagine the pundits saying, wow, Donald Trump was so presidential. He would have had a 72-hour news cycle about what a normal human being he was.
Now, listen, guys, I just want to use this last second of this segment here to show the contrast when we talk about McCain, the president. I'm not talking the fact that Trump, 5 deferments, including bone spurs, he didn't remember the foot that kept him out of Vietnam when, McCain spent 5.5 years as a POW and Trump doesn't call him. Forget all the differences between the two men. This is John McCain, for anyone who forgot, in 2008. He's trailing in the polls at the end. Advisors are telling him, go as negative as you can, play into the whole Muslim card of Obama, play into, that he doesn't love America and everything else. He's not a real American. Just let me remind you the exchange from this woman on the campaign trail in Minnesota, I believe, and then candidate McCain, and how he chose to respond when that was said to him.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No,
ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about.
Okay, so 3 weeks from the election, John McCain, who was on the ballot, chose to take the high road. Now, let me tell you what the president said apparently last night. He had a meeting with evangelical leaders, and he told them, quote, if the GOP loses in the midterms, they will overturn everything that we've, conservative Christians, I love Trump's conservative Christian, but anyway, that we have done, and they'll quickly do it, and violently. There's violence. When you look at Antifa and you look at some of these groups, they're violent people. He warned of violence in the streets. The week after, he said the stock market would crash if he was impeached here and people would be poor. Just think about the character of the two men, McCain and now this president. And I don't need to say anything else. When we come back, it has been a huge buildup just locally here when we're talking about the primaries in New York. So the question is, what do the men and women seeking to become the next governor or attorney general need to do in this week's debates to move to the front of the field or even stay there? Our panel will weigh in. Stay with us.